welcome to the You Only podcast. We've rebranded the whole situation here, and we want to give respect to another podcast out there called the Only You podcast, which had been around longer than my podcast. This is your boy Lo Jackson. This is going to be the same podcast, but you only can create the change in your life. You only have what it takes to make the difference. And today we're going to be talking about psychologist Alfred Adler. He is one of the founding fathers of the psychological movement, and he was born just outside of Vienna, and he came up with the inferiority complex, which every single person out there at some point in your life experiences inferiority, and inferiority comes from pretty much comparing ourselves to others, the constant feeling of inferior or inferiority, as though somebody's better than you, bigger than you, faster than you can't do enough. We've all gone through those situations in our life, but Alfred Adler said an insecurity becomes an inferiority when the individual is unable to overcome their flaws. Folks, remember, your flaws define who you are. They aren't flaws in God's eyes. You carry those genes for a reason, because you're here for a purpose. And you have to find a will and a way to make that happen today, because you're beautiful, you're charming, you're enchanting, and you have a beautiful, wonderful life here that is very short, my friend. So enjoy it. Too much parental surveillance can make a child feel incapable or weak, and caring for themselves is what Adler also had to say. A child raised in an abusive environment may cause them to question their worth, which makes an individual develop an inferiority complex. And I want to share with you, audience members, I am a victim of child abuse. I was taken away from my mom on October 16th, 1996, after an altercation with a baseball bat. And I pretty much ran to the middle of town to the payphone, called the police, which my teachers at school at the time kept encouraging me to do. And now that I know that that was the ploy to tear the parents away from the children and how things were going to be in the future, I would have never done those things to my mom. But yeah, I actually was a victim, and I have come to terms with those times. I have forgiven my mom. She's forgiven me. We've moved forward. We've made progress, in which that's what life is really about. And when you are brought up in an abusive environment, you are more likely to develop an inferiority complex, because you're around people who constantly question everything you do. And like Alfred Adler had found in his studies, too much parental constraint or oversight, I guess, can cause an inferiority complex, because you're constantly being critiqued about every little aspect of your life. We need to learn to let children be children, let them play, let them do their thing, just keep them safe, give them boundaries, and you know what to do. You have a way about yourself that you've been born into. You have traits that were passed down to you, and you should pass all the great ones on to your kids, like I have mine, and hopefully my kids enjoy all those things that I've passed on to them. Inferiority complexes are real. Every single one of us has had the opportunity to go through something in our lives, whether it be early on in our younger years, from siblings fighting or battling to physical change as an adolescent that can cause inferiority complexes when you start developing and growing things that weren't there, and then people are noticing them, and then it makes you feel a certain type of way, and it makes you develop an insecurity. So an insecurity will in time develop an inferiority complex. So we got to be aware of certain things that we're doing to ourselves, like Adler had warned, and Adler actually, always promoted positive affirmations is the way to deal with an inferiority complex, whatever it may be, whether it's, an inferiority complex on the job, whether it be an inferiority complex at home, whether it be an inferiority complex within inside of yourself that you've developed over time and you're maybe not even aware of it. You just keep on living and thinking, you keep thinking the same things, but not really zooming back and looking into your life to see why you're having these issues and thoughts and feelings and stuff. And sometimes we have to remember to zoom out, take a look at the big picture. But while we're going through all these different inferiority complexes that we're developing or insecurities, Alfred Adler wanted us to remember positive affirmations is the treatment to anything that makes you feel inferior. So when I get up in the morning at 3:21 in the morning, 3, 2, 1, and I'm out of bed, I look in the mirror and I think to myself, who is that fine piece? Who is that sexy MFer? I want to just eat him up. I sound stupid, but it's true. And over my whole life, I have done this. And I got the idea from watching SNL as a kid. And they had Stuart Smalley on there, and he had Michael Jordan on there. I love those Chicago Bulls. But I'll never forget this. And I seen the one with Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan said, he looked in the mirror. He said, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me. And in reality, we all laughed and joked, but I kept doing that stuff because it made me feel empowered. Who's going to be your cheerleader in the world if you're not your own cheerleader first? And that's what you have to remember when you want to give yourself positive affirmations too, due to an inferiority complex or insecurities that you're developing from certain, situations. Thank you for listening to the You Only podcast. It's a rebranding. Hopefully you enjoy it, and hopefully you enjoy this Alfred Adler learning session. It's a rainy fall day. Thanksgiving just passed by. It is Men's Health Awareness Month here at the You Only podcast. This is your host, Lo Jackson. We're learning about Alfred Adler and his individual psychology. And individual psychology says that humans are primarily motivated by social connectedness and a strive for superiority or success. And Adler believed that feelings of inferiority drive individuals to achieve personal goals. Does anybody out there feel this way? Do they feel like they literally have striven for success and feel superior? And do you believe that, your feelings of inferiority drive yourself to achieve those personal goals? I feel like I can relate to this. I have gone through certain aspects of my life where being an abused child, I've dealt with inferiority like this, and I have literally striven to be so successful because I just was forced into a system that made me want to rise above and be better. And early interaction with family members and peers and adults, that helped to determine the role of inferiority and superiority in my life. Adler believed that birth order had a significant and predictable impact on a child's personality and their feelings of inferiority. And there is another aspect that I've actually had the opportunity to study it, and it's the hierarchy of the family, or the dysfunction really, of the family. And I want to share with you today the 4 types of dysfunctional roles in a family. And the first one's the hero. So normally the hero is like the firstborn. The hero on the outside is perfect and is always right. This person is an overachiever and tends to receive a high amount of praise and positive attention. We all know that person. And on the inside, the hero has an immense fear of failure and letting down the family by not living up to the expectation to be perfect. The dysfunction for the hero role becomes dysfunctional when it becomes dependent on success. Pressure mounts to always be successful, to be the face of the family. And we all know this person in our families. And this is here in America. Children heroes are pressured by the family to excel in school, take honor classes, pursue higher education, and to never fail. The second one is the scapegoat and the family hierarchy of dysfunction. The scapegoat pretty much is the opposite of the hero role and is seen as the problem of the family. The scapegoat is also referred to as the black sheep of the family and has a hard time fitting in and relating to the other family members. His or her role behavior is seen as bad or never good enough. The scapegoat tends to be more impulsive and angry, but on the inside, although the scapegoat may put up an angry effect to keep others away, on the inside, the scapegoat is filled with shame, hurt, and rejection. The scapegoat has little motivation to succeed because he or she already feels like a failure or a loser. And the dysfunction is when paired with the hero of the family, the scapegoat can feel as if she or he is a sponge to absorb all the bad things the hero cannot handle. For example, the hero may feel better about himself or herself when married to a scapegoat because it gives the hero permission to offload all the fear and rejection and failure right onto them. The scapegoat may feel as if he or she isn't all that bad because the hero is choosing to be partnered to them. Someone in a scapegoat role with some help can learn to be good and to feel good. He or she will learn to step back from black and white thinking, I'm either all good or all bad, and into a more balanced perspective of self. With this balanced thinking comes the ability to take appropriate risk and opportunities in order to achieve goals. The third one is the lost child, and the lost child refers to an individual in a family that is often ignored, quiet, and seems or feels invisible. This person has a low self identity and worth, and their sense of self is little, and it's not much is expected of the lost child because this person is often not pushed to try hard or to succeed. But on the outside, the lost child tends to have frozen feelings resulting from feelings never receiving a sense of value. The lost child feels alone and misunderstood as an adult. The lost child tends to fill voids with material items and turning inward for hobbies such as art or writing. The lost child also may have learning disabilities resulting from poor nutrition or lack of guidance as a child. The lost child tends to keep opinions to him or herself and rarely feels needed or as a contributor to the family. This can lead to depression and in some cases suicide when the individual feels like more of a burden to the family. Excuse me. With some help, the lost child can learn to accept feelings and learn how to appropriately express emotions. The lost child can be extremely valuable when solving problems because he or she has learned to think things through internally and through listening before speaking. The lost child is very creative thanks to those inward hobbies and often talented. With time, the lost child can learn to feel connected to others again and a healthy sense of self. The fourth one is the clown or mascot. And thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. And I'm teaching you right now about the 4 types of dysfunctions in the American family today. And the fourth one is the clown or mascot, which is just what it sounds like. Funny, goofy, often immature, and does anything for a laugh. The clown role is often frowned upon in school settings by teachers and can either be popular with other children or found to be a complete annoyance. On the outside, the clown mascot continuously hides pain with humor and feels inadequate. The clown mascot is seldom taken seriously or respected. The family can sometimes promote the role in an individual as a way to avoid tough issues and be provided with comic relief. The dysfunction. As pain continues to build up and remain covered or avoided, the clown mascot becomes more burdened, which can result in depression. The clown mascot may feel pressured to always cover up others' pain as well by making others laugh or cheer up instead of working through issues. The clown mascot tends to be a follower and allow others to dictate his or her life, even if not consciously. The respected comedian. With help, the clown mascot may learn assertive skills to be able to tell others no to helping them cheer up if he or she chooses. The clown mascot can accept and feel a range of emotions and use laughter in more functional and appropriate ways. The clown mascot can grow into a more assertive leader with responsibilities. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. And we're talking about Alfred Adler. He was an early associate of Sigmund Freud in Vienna, but his revolutionary observations triggered a life of research dedicated to understanding people that he called individual psychology. Adler's comprehensive theory of human behavior has resulted in models of practice that have had broad impact on the fields of education, social science, family life, psychology, and psychotherapy. He pioneered ideas and techniques that have become the basis for most contemporary work, including cognitive behavior therapy, reality therapy, solution focus therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, existential therapy, holistic psychology, and family therapy, to name a few. Theorists as diverse as Karen Horney, which I've talked about her in other podcasts because she believed, or she was against Freud's theory of women's penis envy. Erich Fromm, Viktor Frankl, which Viktor Frankl, I did a podcast on him. It was one of my first ones of in our second season. You'll have to go back and check it out. And that is A Man's Search for Meaning. Abraham Maslow, Albert Ellis, and Aaron T. Beck credit Adler's work as an important basis for their own contributions. So those are people that pretty much believed in his theories, and they piggybacked off them and tried to dive deeper into his theories to really understand the roots of where his thoughts came from. Adler was one of the earliest theorists to utilize a short-term, active, focused, and solution-oriented approach to psychotherapy. And Adler's work is fundamental to the professions and practices of school psychology, school counseling, the community mental health movement, and parent education. As a dynamic and vital view of human development, individual psychology continues to grow and thrive in a changing world. And I would say that Thyra Bolds once wrote of Adler that he was real, whether he was joking or serious, whether in private discussion or lectures. His real personality always seemed to say, "Life is holy." Have reverence for life. Everything which happens is important. In his youth, Adler was a sickly child, which caused him embarrassment and pain. These early experiences with illness and accidents probably account for his theory of organ inferiority, and where the foundation for his theories on inferiority feelings came from. According to Adler, each individual has a weak area in his or her body. Organ inferiority, which tends to be the area where illness occurs, such as the stomach, head, heart, back, lungs, etc. Adler said that to some degree, every emotion finds expression in the body. From his understanding to organ inferiority, Adler began to see each individual as having a feeling of inferiority. Adler wrote, to be a human being means to feel oneself inferior. The child comes into the world as a helpless little creature surrounded by powerful adults. A child is motivated by feelings of inferiority to strive for greater things. Those feelings of inferiority act a person to strive upwards, so that normal feelings of inferiority impel the human being to solve his or her problems successfully, whereas the inferiority complex impedes or prevents one from doing so. They may express this selfishness in a need to dominate, to refuse to cooperate, wanting to take and not to give. From these unhealthy responses, the person develops an inferiority complex, a superiority complex. A superiority complex is a cover-up for an inferiority complex. They are different sides of the same coin. The healthy individual will strive to overcome his or her inferiority through involvement with society. One is concerned about the welfare of others as well as oneself, and develops good feelings of self-worth and self-assurance. On the other hand, some are more concerned with selfishness than with social interest. The person with the superiority complex has hidden doubts about his or her abilities. Adler developed a theory of personality based upon inferiority feelings and inferiority complex, striving for superiority, style of life, social interest, family constellation, fictional finalism. Hopefully you enjoy Alfred Adler. Individual Psychology by Alfred Adler. 1. There is one basic dynamic force behind all human activity, a striving from a felt minus situation towards a plus situation, from a feeling of inferiority towards superiority, perfection, and totality. 2. The striving receives its specific direction from an individually unique goal or self-ideal, which, through influence by biological and environmental factors, is ultimately the creation of the individual, because it is an ideal. The goal is a fiction. And I always tell everyone, environment is why you are the way you are, why you feel the way you feel. Your environment is everything. That's why it's important to live in a successful environment. 3. The goal is only dimly envisaged by the individual, which means that it is largely unknown to him and not understood by him. This is Adler's definition of the unconscious, the unknown part of the goal. 4. The goal becomes the final cause, the ultimate independent variable. To the extent that the goal provides the key for understanding the individual, it is a working hypothesis on the part of the psychologist. 5. All psychological processes form a self-consistent organization from the point of view of the goal, like a drama which is constructed from the beginning with the final in view. The self consistent personality structure is what Adler calls the style of life. It becomes firmly established at an early age, which time on behavior that is apparently contradictory is only the adaptation of different means to the same end. 6. All apparent psychological categories, such as different drives or the contrast between conscious and unconscious, are only aspects of a unified rational system and do not represent discrete entities and quantities. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. It's a rebranding season 3, and hopefully you're enjoying your boy Lo Jackson bringing you Alfred Adler's individual psychology today. Number 7 is all objective determiners, such as biological factors and past history, become relative to the goal idea. They do not function as direct causes, but provide probabilities only. The individual uses all objective factors in accordance with his style of life. Their significance and effectiveness is developed only in the intermediary psychological metabolism, so to speak. The individual's opinion of himself and the world is number 8. His interpretations, all as aspects of the style of life, influence every psychological process. And we know that's true. We can see that in people around us today. Number 9, the individual cannot be considered part of his social situation. Individual psychology regards and examines the individual as social embedded. We refuse to recognize and examine an isolated human being. Number 10, all important life problems, including certain drive satisfactions, become social problems. All values become social values. 11, the socialization of the individual is not achieved at the cost of repression, but is afforded through an intimate human ability which, however, needs to be developed. It is this ability which Adler calls social feeling or social interest. Because the individual is embedded in a social situation, social interests become crucial for his adjustment. 12. Maladaptive adjustment is characterized by increased inferiority feelings, underdeveloped social interest, and an exaggerated uncooperative goal of personal superiority. Accordingly, problems are solved in a self-centered private sense, rather than a task-centered, common-sense fashion. And in neurotic, this leads to the experience of failure because he still accepts the social validity of his actions as his ultimate criteria. The psychotic, on the other hand, while objectively also a failure, that is, in the eyes of the common sense, does not experience failure because he does not accept the ultimate criteria of social validity. The remainder of this introduction will present individual psychology in its larger context. And so, Freud and Adler. Adler's psychology was often a depth psychology. That is, a psychology which discovers deeply buried unconscious phenomena. For Adler, however, the unconscious was, as stated above, merely that part of an individual's lifestyle which he does not understand, and understanding is afforded by viewing all processes in their large context. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast, and this is Alfred Adler's individual psychology. Depth psychology was, of course, founded to all intents and purposes by Sigmund Freud, who named his theory and method psychoanalysis. Freud and Adler and Carl Jung have often been mentioned as the first of this new field. Both Adler and Jung were at first associated with Freud, but later separated from him, Adler in 1911 and Jung in 1913. Jung's form of depth psychology, known as analytic psychology, analytic psychology and complex psychology will not concern us before Adler gives no indication of having been stimulated by Jung. The influence of Freud, however, is reflected throughout Adler's work, which, to a large content, developed as an antithesis to that of Freud. When Adler was invited by Freud in 1902 to join the psychoanalytical circle, he was a young practicing physician, 14 years younger than Freud. Soon he became a prominent member of the group. He was highly esteemed by Freud and eventually named his successor as president of the Vienna Psychoanalytical Society and become co-editor of an early psychoanalytical journal. At the same time, theoretical differences developed. These gradually increased to the point where both Adler and Freud regarded them as irreconcilable differences, and Adler resigned from his positions in the psychoanalytic movement. That's a very hard word to say, fan members. Psychoanalytic. Sorry, I sound crazy, I'm sure, when I'm reading this to you. Thank you for enjoying my reads. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being here for some of your time. Because, the greatest gift in life, you guys, is when you give somebody your time. And I do appreciate every single one of you for your time that you spend here with me, listening and learning like I am too. And hopefully you're enjoying Alfred Adler and his theory of individual psychology. In one of his earliest and most famous publications, Study of Organ Inferiority and its Physical Compensation, Adler outlined the basics for what would be the beginning foundation of his personality theory. The article focuses mainly on the topics of organ inferiority and compensation. Organ inferiority is when one organ or portion of the body is weaker than the rest. Adler postulated that the body's other organs would work together in order to compensate for the weakness of this inferior organ. When compensation occurs, other areas of the body make up for the function lacking in the inferior portion. In some cases, the weakness may be overcompensated, transforming it into a strength. An example would be an individual with a weak leg becoming a great runner later on. As his theory progressed, the idea of organ inferiority was replaced with feelings of inferiority instead. As Adler's theory progressed, he continued evolving his theory and key ideas. And I want to say that if you ever start working on your body, and each week in and week out, you're trying to develop all your different muscles on your body. You do chest on Monday, you do legs on Tuesday, you do back on Wednesday, you do calves on Thursday. Whatever you do in your routine when you work out, you'll realize in 6 months that there's a certain muscle group on your body that is dominant. It'll become way more muscular, way more bigger, and way more powerful. And you'll continue wanting to work those muscles out. But if you think about it, that's a type of organ inferiority because your DNA has made you that way because your people came from a place where, you had to have mega leg strength. Maybe you were carrying large animals back to the camp to be slaughtered. Maybe you were carrying logs to build houses, whatever, your family did all those years ago. But Individual Psychology by Alfred Adler, personalistic psychology, the psychological system with which Adler was most in sympathy, according to a biographer, was that of William Stern. Stern defined his personalistic psychology as the science of the person having experience. The immediate subject matter of psychology experience is therefore to be identified and interpreted in terms of its matrix. The unity, goal-directed person. Adler acknowledged his relationship when he said, William Stern, in a different way, has arrived at results similar to mine. He made this acknowledgement in connection with the following early definition of individual psychology. It attempts to gain from the separate life manifestation and forms of expression the picture of the self-consistent personality as a variant by presupposing the unity and self-consistency of the individuality. The separate traits are then compared with one another and reduced to their common denominator and are combined in an individualizing manner into a total portrait. Adler felt indebted to Stern primarily for his great contribution of a philosophical foundation for finalism, that is, the interpretation of life processes in terms of their goals. The emphasis in the above definition of individual psychology lies on the individualizing manner which led Adler later to the concept of the style of life. By this token, Adler's psychology was, from the start, an ideographic science. According to the classification of Wilhelm Wendelband, the term ideographic pertains to laws which are particular to the individual case, with nomothetic formulations are laws of general validity. To be sure, Adler's psychology, like any science, developed nomothetic principles as well, compensation, the striving for superiority, social interest, but the emphasis always rested on the ideographic aspect, the style of life, the opinion of the self, the individual goal. In fact, the very first paper in Adler's journal, one by Alexander Neuer, proclaimed individual psychology the ideographic science par excellence. By contrast, from Freudian conceptions are nomothetic, which nomothetic is the scientific study of laws, Oedipus complex, sex drive, death wish, penis envy, and the like, are among present-day psychologist Gordon W. Allport is particularly closely related to Stern, and although Allport hesitates to be labeled a personalistic psychologist, he called his work on personality a contribution to the same line of thought. Accordingly, we are not surprised to find considerable similarity between Allport and Adler. And today we're doing Adler's individual psychology. Thank you for listening to the You Only podcast, rebranded this season 3. We appreciate each and every one of you here. And this is your personal journey. This is your podcast as well as it is mine. You only. And a child raised in an abusive environment may have all kinds of different questions, whether they are worth anything, which makes an individual develop that inferiority complex. This episode is about inferiority complex and Mr. Alfred Adler's individual psychology. He has many other different writings as well. You can check those out on the internet. You can pick a lot of them up on Amazon, Kindle. I believe Google Books has one as well. And thank you for tuning in to the You Only podcast. This podcast wouldn't be possible without each and every one of you tuning in each week. Our ratings are shooting through the roof. Many more listeners are being attracted to this podcast, so I'm grateful that I'm being shared and I'm being followed. Please give me your review on Spotify. You just click on the little stars and, give your shout out or whatever it is you can do on there. They have a great platform. I'm grateful for them, and I'm grateful for all of you too. And hopefully you're enjoying learning about Alfred Adler's individual psychology today. It's a rainy day here where I'm at in Illinois, and it may be even snowing in some parts where you're at listening. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time, and that's the greatest gift you can give anybody on this planet. And this season's going to be great. I'm trying to get some interviews going on. It isn't as easy as it sounds. We're all busy. We all have lives, but thank you for listening, and thank you for following me, and thank you for sharing me again. It does mean a lot. Hopefully you enjoy Alfred Adler, Individual Psychology. An inferiority complex is not the same as noticing that someone can do something better than you. We all have moments of feeling that other people are more capable or successful than us. It's how we respond to those feelings that's important. Do you reflect and feel motivated to pursue your own goals? Or do you get caught in a spiral of rumination, self-blame, and inadequacy? Does it feel like a confirmation of a pattern or belief in your own inherent inferiority? What do you think? Do you always feel inferior? Because the American Psychological Association defines an inferiority complex as a basic feeling of inadequacy and insecurity, deriving from actual or imaginative physical or psychological deficiencies. It's a term that dates back to 1907 when psychoanalyst Alfred Adler used it to explain why so many people seem to lack the motivation to act in their own best interest and pursue their goals in life. Today, we tend to call it low self-esteem. But if you regularly feel bad about yourself when you compare yourself to others and it's interfering with your life, you might have an inferiority complex. You may feel yourself to be actually physically, intellectually, socially, or psychologically inferior to others in your peer group. Feeling inferior can be an isolating experience. You got to ask yourself, do any of the following sound familiar? The smallest circumstances makes you feel terrible for days. You're a perfectionist and nothing is ever quite good enough. You feel like an outsider looking in, like you're different in some way. You have an overriding sense of worthlessness and not feeling good enough. You hide the real you from the world because you think you're unacceptable. You're a people pleaser and constantly defer to others. You always compare yourself against other people's top qualities. Social media makes you feel miserable because everyone seems to be happier or more successful than you are. If you feel inferior much of the time, you're at great risk of anxiety and depression. If you're feeling not as good as other people, you may feel anxious in many situations and suffer from social anxiety. And low self-esteem is a key factor in development and maintenance of depression. So, where do these feelings of inferiority come from? There are a number of possibilities, mostly to do with how you think about yourself and others. They may include comparison with others. Social media can be led to unhealthy comparisons for some people. Perfectly captured, cropped and filtered images on Instagram can make it seem that everyone is better looking than you and enjoying a more glamorous lifestyle. But you know that's not true. You see actresses nowadays who post pictures of themselves and they're with no makeup and they look terrifying. Thank you for listening to the You Only podcast, and hopefully if you're having any types of feelings of inferiority, you may look online to find places and tactics that will work for you to conquer those certain insecurities and feelings inside of ourselves that make us the way we are today, and maybe we will be better tomorrow, knowing that we have the tools we need right there at our fingertips. We all have phones Get on there and check it out. Thank you for tuning in. Season 3, rebranded, you only. Check it out. I want to give a shout out to some of my fan members. We got Amy over there at Casey's. She's been listening. I walked in one day and she was like, I've been listening to your podcast. Everybody in the whole store looked at me. I was like, oh, thank you for listening, though. And thank you so much to, obviously, Bianca. She was on the show. She's a fan. She lives in Texas. Thank you to Cia Zamora in the Philippines. She's a fan. Thank you so much to Jim over there at Walmart. I know he's a fan. And many of you have worked with me. Some of you grew up with me. I appreciate all of you. And I do want to say thank you so much to all the fan members who get involved in my podcast and listen to the things that I'm learning about, that I'm trying to tell you about, because these books are important. Nobody thinks about them. Everybody's too busy, but hey, I found something and I like it. I enjoy sharing it. So hopefully you enjoy listening. I feel like if somebody takes the time to make something, I got a little time to listen. And again, it's only the greatest gift in the world, and that is your time. And I appreciate all of you, and hopefully you had a great and happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully you're thankful for all the things that have happened to you this year, and hopefully we get on to a new start, a fresh start, and things start to really turn around here for us, which I do believe they will. I love you guys, and thank you for following me, and thank you for sharing me. This is your boy Lo Jackson. Tune in next time for another great read.